right, good afternoon, everyone. Glad you are here today for Teacher Tuesday. And today's session is on participating in the 2020 election with Cynthia Peters. And I'll introduce her in just a minute. Along with me is not Anne-Marie. I have used the absolute wrong slideshow. I apologize for that. I actually have Liz Moya and Tracy Hendricks with me today, and it is October 13th, not September 8th. So, all right, let me introduce Miss Cynthia Peters. She works for World Education and is the editor for the national publication, The Change Agent. She currently teaches ESOL in a workplace program in Boston, and since 2002 has taught a wide range of adult education classes, including ABE, GED, Bridge to College, and the Adult Diploma Program.
Thank you so much for that warm welcome, and thanks to everybody for being here today. I really appreciate this opportunity to present and to be with you teachers. I always enjoy my time with you Texas folks so much. And like Krista said, I really appreciate any kind of interaction. So using the chat as much as you want for commenting or asking questions. And I'm going to do my best to keep checking in on the chat to make sure, see what's going on in there. And I also gave Krista strict instructions to interrupt me if there's stuff in the chat that I should be paying attention to, because I get carried away sometimes and I skip over. Oh, let me just mention my email address there on that first slide. And maybe that is something you could drop into the chat for me, Krista. I just want to make sure people know how to reach me, and please do, be in touch if you have any questions about anything I presented today, or if you want to let me know how it went. If you tried out any of the activities, I'd love to get your feedback about how it went. So here's what we're going to do after we work our way through kind of getting grounded in the introductions, et cetera. I'm going to just do a quick reminder about the census, because believe it or not, it's still going on. And then we're going to mostly focus on voting. And I kind of divided it into two things. One is some procedural stuff about what's happening in Texas. And then the other is sort of an opportunity to teach into the larger context using this really cool lesson packet that I have for you, available both in PDF format and Google Slides. It's a really cool adaptation that we have of our teaching materials to be more friendly for distance learning. And I'm actually at that point in the agenda, I'm going to give you a chance to go off on a little field trip and check out the Google Slides yourself and come back and sort of share a little bit about what you notice in them. So be ready to go off onto another tab and check that out. Okay, first thing, I want to make sure everybody knows that TCAL bought a bulk online subscription for all of its teachers and the teachers that TCAL supports in Texas. And there's a really easy username and password right there. The username is capital T call, because when you're kind of inputting this on your phone, it defaults to a capital T for the first letter. So we wanted to make it just as easy as possible for students or teachers or anybody who's typing that into their phone or their laptop. So username capital T call and password just all lowercase t call. This is your opportunity to share this with your students, to browse around on our website, look at all of our back issues, look at all of our content, all of our audio articles, and just use them freely. A lot of it is so easy to use for distance learning or for in the classroom learning. So I hope everybody has that information. I'm going to put that slide up again one more time at the very end in case you didn't quite grab the username and password. So the New England Literacy Resource Center, which is the entity that produces the Change Agent, has been focusing on these two big civics moments in 2020, the census and the election. And I wanted to take a very brief moment to just remind people about the census. I've done lots of work with Texas teachers on the census, so I don't want to beat a dead horse or whatever that saying is. But I just want to say that, there's a few more weeks for people to fill out the census. And I did a screen grab of this hard to count communities map that the census does. It's a really cool interactive map. And you can see from the first week in September, which is when I last presented to y'all, what the self-response count was versus the first week of October. I took this screenshot yesterday, I think. And even in a month, there's been some changes. I know it's a little hard to see probably, but the darker the blue, the higher the self-response count rate, and the darker the brown, the lower. And so some of the darker brown has shifted to lighter brown. Some of the yellow has shifted to white. There's a little bit darker blue in some areas. There's shifts are happening. And this is just the self-response rate. It doesn't count the census workers going out and knocking on doors. So once you add that in here, the count looks even better than it looks here. But you can see that there's areas that are pretty undercounted. And so I encourage you, if you can, to just promote during these last couple weeks, getting people to go to census.gov. They don't have to have a postcard with a census ID number on it or anything like that. They just have to put in their address. It's really easy. If they don't have a normal, quote unquote, normal street address, they can put in like a description of the rural road that they live on. And they can describe their house has a front porch or a garage or a red door, or, they can literally do that for their address and then fill out the census and get counted. So just one last plug, to get as many people counted in your state as possible before October 31st. So let's move on to voting. This VERA campaign, VERA stands for Voter Education, Registration, and Action. And it's a nonpartisan effort to help adult learners plug into the election and to give teachers resources to teach the election. So you can go to that website and explore a lot of materials. They're divided by, on the far right, the first tab is classroom resources, a lot of teaching materials there. Then there's program resources. Those are materials for your program. For example, one of the ideas we have is to hold a mock election in your program, just to give people a chance to kind of experiment with voting in a mock way before they do it for real. The state specific stuff just applies to New England, so you're not going to find anything there for Texas. Okay, so let's dive into Texas and see what's going on. Some things have already ended. For example, the opportunity to register to vote is passed. That was October 5th. Texas has one of the earliest, registration deadlines of any state. That's something that's probably going to be contested over the years, so keep an eye on that. The big important dates for right now are that in-person early voting has started today, and somebody pointed that out in the chat, and thank you for that. And I heard that there's long lines already. That's really exciting news. It means people are enthusiastic about voting. It also kind of points to the power of early voting. I mean, if there's already long lines, that means that, there's perhaps a little bit of under capacity for handling all the voters. And so having a longer early voting period really helps more people get counted. So this early voting is really important. I would really promote it with your learners. If you're teaching about voting in the classroom and encouraging people to vote, taking advantage of early voting is important for many reasons, especially during the pandemic. One thing about it is that it makes it less likely that you'll have to stand in a long line, notwithstanding today. Maybe there's a lot of enthusiasm for the first day. But since it's spread out over time, the voters are spread out. And so you're going to be exposed to less potential virus because there's just fewer people than it would be if everybody was trying to fit in there in 1 week or fit in there on election day. The other thing is that if you get to the voting place and you don't have the right ID with you, or something goes wrong with your registration, or just something is amiss and you're not allowed to vote, you have a little bit more time to figure it out. So that's why shout out to anybody who goes on the first day of early voting. They're going to find out sooner rather than later if there's some problem, and they'll be able to fix it. Okay, so that's another reason to vote early. The other deadline up there is if you want to request a mail-in ballot, that has to be received by October 23rd. Okay, and then of course, the general election is November 3rd. I guess one important thing to point out here is that for early voting, you should really check your locality because there's just different hours and possibly dates for different locations. So really important to check your exact area and see what's going on there. Okay, what if you do want to apply for a mail-in ballot? This is how you do it in Texas. You go to the link that I supplied there at the top of this slide, and you can fill out the PDF online because it is a fillable PDF, or you can just print out a blank one and fill it out. In any case, you have to print it out to sign it. And then you have to address it correctly, and you have to stamp it, and you have to send it to your proper county office. So you need to go to that link at the bottom to find the right address of your county office, election office. Does that make sense? It's a lot of steps, but this is a great digital literacy opportunity to try out with students. It's a chance for them to practice filling out a PDF online or just printing it out and filling it out and mailing it in and looking up the right address. It's also an opportunity to kind of stick with something. If you can get a little bit flummoxed by some of the links or some of the things that you have to do to find the right information, but sort of teaching that persistence around sort of sticking with something until you actually figure it out can be a really good thing to do. I should say that in Texas, not everybody can vote by mail. And I had a slide about this in my last presentation. I don't have a slide this time, but it's not universal. Well, a lot of states have gone universal. COVID itself is the only excuse you need for applying for a mail-in ballot. And so that's, for example, is true in my state, Massachusetts. I don't have to make the case for myself or show that I'm over a certain age or that I'm disabled or that I'm in prison or something like that. Or I'm out of the country or anything. I can get the COVID is all the excuse I need, for getting my mail-in ballot. But that's not true in Texas. You have to be over 65, you have to be disabled or out of the county or, various criteria that you have to. So make sure your students don't do this thinking that they can, unless they meet those criteria. Okay. I looked around a little bit at Texas ballots and wow, you guys vote on everything and everybody. It's the longest ballot I've ever seen. There's so many, there was something like a railroad, superintendent that you would vote for in some areas. So I really recommend helping your students get a look at the ballot, because if they just show up to vote without having seen the ballot ahead of time, they might feel completely and thoroughly overwhelmed. So the way you can look at your ballot is, I suggest using ballotpedia.com. It's a great website. I'm sorry, it's .org, ballotpedia.org. You have to put in your address and then you'll get a sample ballot, which has all the information that you need about what's going to be on your ballot in your location. Okay, because it can be dramatically different for people in different parts of the state. And then I would really have a conversation with students about this idea of the ballot being potentially overwhelming. Now, it's great if people want to research and vote on every line. That's fantastic. If you want to help support people to figure that out, great. Or if you want to help, sort of ask the class, like, which lines do you most want to vote on? And then we'll research those and sort of figure it out together. Which ones do you care less about? You could, demote those to having less priority because you don't have endless class time to do this. And you can remind students that, it's okay to not fill out the ballot completely. That's perhaps not doing your 100% civic duty, but I would rather have people vote for what they can vote for or feel confident voting for than have them not vote at all. So I think just reminding people that that's optional, is a good thing to do. It's also good for them to think about, are there any ballot questions that they might need to answer? Because it's not just voting for candidates, it's voting for questions too, sometimes, depending on what's on your ballot. Okay, let me pause for a second and see what's going on in the chat.
All All right, been a few things. I've been just adding some of your links.
Okay.
That's the Railroad Commissioner, and it actually doesn't have much to do with the railroad. It's oil and gas.
Okay. Interesting.
Yes.
Yeah, that was something, yeah, that I noticed. So good to know. I mean, and that's something that you could teach or not, depending on what you want to do. But thank you for that, Railroad Commissioner. Yeah. And then people are also pointing out that, some counties provide their own sample ballots and that the League of Women Voters has a lot of information as well. That's true. Great. And the local paper does too. Great. This is all great teaching opportunities because you're showing students where they can get information and how they can get it safely. So, which sources to depend on, which would you, and there's a lot of fake news out there. There's a lot of fake information. I actually read in the paper today that there's somebody, I think it's in California, in some part of California, they're putting out fake ballot boxes.
Oh, no.
So, there's a lot to think about. We really want to be our sharpest critical thinkers at this moment. So, okay, now just continuing with some more procedural stuff. And I hope this isn't, I know it's a lot of procedural stuff and we're not going to only do this, but I think it's important just to kind of wend our way through this, to just make sure we have a good idea of what's involved in voting and that so that we can communicate with our teachers in a good way about it. So submitting your ballot. So you've researched your ballot, you figured out how you want to vote. And now how do you actually submit your ballot? Well, you can do it during early voting, and sort of memorizing those dates is a good idea. And you should do so safely. And it's good to talk about how to do that safely, wearing a mask, keeping social distance, sanitizing your hands before and after, that kind of thing. We don't want anybody to go vote and get sick as a result. It's also, figuring out where to vote. Now, one thing I noticed is that, there's a link there where you can find out where you can go do your early voting, and it didn't get populated until 2 days before early voting started. So that was on the 11th. So it should obviously be populated by now since today's the first day. But that seemed kind of like a close call to me. Like it's too bad that if you were teaching about voting, you couldn't have access to that information a little sooner to help students start planning how to do this. But in any case, that information is up and available. So find out the right place to go do your early voting. You'll need to input your VUID. Anybody know what that is? I do. I looked it up. Voter unique ID. So that's something that you get in Texas, or you can have your Texas driver's license, or you input your name, county, and date of birth in order to get the information that you need. More navigating websites, using drop-down menus, finding the right documents, inputting the right information, all that stuff is really good teaching opportunity. Whether people end up voting or not, the practice of doing these steps is really worthwhile. So of course you can also wait till November 3rd to vote, and you can use that same website as the one I put in the first bullet. And it's the same thing. It's not the polling place information isn't going to be available till 2 days before Election Day. That's kind of odd to me. You'd think they would know before then, but that's what the website says. So if you're coaching people on voting and then figuring out where to vote, that's what the current information is. You can also send in your marked ballot if you're allowed to vote by mail, and that has to be received by 7 p.m. on Tuesday, November 3rd, or it could be received the next day if it's postmarked the previous day. A lot of small print there. Lots going on with this election. Honestly, it is a lot. It seems like it should be straightforward, but there's a lot of things to think about. So I wanted to, just kind of touch on all those things for you. I hope it's helpful to just get a little briefing on that from me so that then you can take it back to your classroom with more confidence and without having to do all that kind of pesky hunting around for that information. You will get a copy of these slides, so you'll get all those links. So Texas elections in the news. Yeah, there's just so much going on in your state. And I really encourage you to teach with some of these newspaper articles if you can. I love this headline, How Texas Has Made It Easier and Harder for People to Vote in the Pandemic. So, the governor extended early voting, which definitely makes it easier. And thank you for doing that. That's very helpful. Apparently, something that's a little bit harder is that there's been a reduction in the number of places you can drop off your ballot. Maybe there might be only one per county. And I know in Texas, y'all have pretty big counties. So there could be a lot of driving around for somebody to, if they felt like they didn't want to mail in their ballot, but they wanted to just drop it in the box. So lots of stuff in current events for you to teach with. When I was looking up sample ballots in Texas, I kind of came across some interesting maps of your congressional districts. And I wanted to share this too, because I think this is an interesting teaching opportunity. From this kind of zoomed out perspective, you can see that some of the districts kind of look semi-rational, sort of a certain block. The boundaries look more or less sensible. But if you zoom in, like especially if you look right down the lower middle, you can see some pretty odd configurations of congressional districts. And I picked a couple of them to share with you. District 2, look at the shape of that district. And the way I came across this was I was looking up Harris County, and I knew Houston was in Harris County, and I was trying to think about what's on the ballot there. And there was just so many different ballots because there's a lot of different congressional districts that incorporate parts of Houston. So this is what we call gerrymandering. It's, both major parties do it. It's nobody's got a monopoly on this. But it's when you reshape a district to benefit your party. And so here's District 35. Look at that. It stretches all the way from San Antonio to Austin. Includes a narrow little bit of various other counties and things. So it's just an interesting thing to look at with your students and a way to understand, what is gerrymandering. And I have something in the Change Agent that explains gerrymandering. It's from an article called Gerrymandering and the Fight for Democracy. It's on pages 19 to 20 of the Stand Up and Be Counted issue. And she's from Georgia, and she talks about gerrymandering in her state. But, you can use it to think about how that might be happening in any state. And when I found out where the word gerrymandering comes from, I thought it was kind of interesting. It goes way back to 1812 when the governor of Massachusetts, redrew the district lines to favor his party. And his name was Eldridge Gerry. And his redrawing of the district looks a little bit like a salamander. And so it became gerrymandering. So just a fun thing to share with learners, where a term comes from and the historical nature of it and how this has kind of happened all throughout history. And Annette Bowen's article also talks a little bit about what we could maybe do about it too. So, civics, whenever we talk about civics, we like to think about, how we can engage with systems that maybe aren't working so well and how could we improve them. Yeah, so what I want to do now is take a break from me just kind of offloading information onto you. And let me check into, were there any questions in the chat at all?
There were no questions, just some comments about gerrymandering. I did not know that. That's very interesting.
Yeah, great. Yeah, good. I'm glad that was new information for some people. I don't learn a lot of things until I have to look them up for the Change Agent, or I think to myself, gerrymandering, where on earth did that name come from? And then I try to find out. And then I just think since I'm a teacher too, I feel like having these little interesting teaching tools to mix it up a little bit, just is fun. In the pandemic issue of the Change Agent, which is our new issue, I looked up the word scapegoating, which is a very interesting story where that word comes from. But I digress, and I will cut that tangent off right away. So let's do something a little bit different now. What I want to share now is a lesson packet that I developed to go with this election season. And what it does is it explores suppression and fraud. Now, anybody been hearing anything about these two topics lately in the news? Anybody been hearing about,
Oh, yeah.
yeah, somebody says, oh yeah, indeed. Yeah. So, you know, this is a big topic in the news. And one thing we tried to figure out was how to, you know, write about it and help teachers teach about it in a nonpartisan way. And so that took a lot of thinking. And some people were just actually recommending, don't even go there. Because, I mean, obviously, you know, Trump is talking a lot about a fraud. And it's one of the first times that we've had a president who has been so negative about the elections being legitimate. And what does that mean? You know, and we're a 501c3. We're not going to speak disparagingly about any candidate or political party. And yet, I really wanted to figure out how to talk about this because it's so important and it matters so much. And to do it in a way that's not favoring one candidate over another or one party over another, but to not skip it altogether, which was sort of the tempting thing to do because it's just too hard to wade into. So what we came up with when we were thinking about it was, how about we just equip students with the tools that they might need to evaluate claims about suppression and fraud? Okay, because you're hearing about this from all directions. So can people see this okay? I made it so the height fit in the window, but I'm not expecting you to really be able to read this, but I just want to give you a quick tour of the PDF. And then what I'm going to do is ask you to look at the Google Slides version of this lesson packet and explore it on your own a little bit more. So allow me to just give you a quick tour, and then you're going to get a chance to just do your own exploring. So here's the front of the lesson packet. It has a picture, a sign that voting rights are human rights, and it gives students a chance to think about the photo, what's happening, say it in your own words. Do you agree or not? What is universal suffrage? What does this mean? What do you think about it? And just getting, you know, people warmed up thinking about this topic. Then comes an activity where students can look at some definitions of suppression and fraud. So the left picture is an image that kind of describes suppression. And the right picture is a picture that kind of describes fraud. And then underneath each one, there's an actual definition in text. And so we just have students really playing around with these kind of complex concepts. This isn't simple. And there's ways that they overlap, and there's ways that's kind of hard to explain how they're different. So, you know, with the standards, you know, we're always being encouraged to scaffold our students into more and more levels of complexity. So this is a great current events opportunity to get them into the complexities of suppression versus fraud and to start thinking critically about what's what. And then, you know, they have an opportunity to write in their own words their definition of suppression versus fraud. And then there's a little quiz on the next page. And this quiz takes real life situations and asks students to put an S for suppression or an F for fraud, depending on which thing they think it describes. Then the answers are upside down right there underneath. And then there's this opportunity to take it further. And my activity here was just to ask students to develop their own questions about suppression and fraud. You know, because that academic skill of developing appropriate questions can be really powerful. And then to maybe do an internet search to see if they can research the answer to their questions. Then comes the opportunity, finally, after all that prep work, there comes an opportunity to evaluate claims about fraud. And so I found 2 tweets, one from Trump and one from Biden. And the activity here is for students to learn about the word claim, and it's both a noun and a verb, and what does it mean? And then to notice, you know, what each candidate here is saying, and then to think about how they can evaluate the claim. What could they do to figure out if it's true, if it's true or not? So that's the activity. Then there's some more on the last page. There's some more readings and activities to help explore related topics. So that is the packet, the lesson packet in PDF format. But now what I want people to do, and Krista, yay, your timing is impeccable, Krista. She has dropped in the Google slideshow. So what I would like is everybody to click on that link and go check out the way that we transferred this packet into a Google slideshow. And I just want you to look it over and then just come back and tell me what you thought about it, if there's a way that you would use it in your own classroom, if anything stood out to you, that kind of thing. So please go on your little field trip now. I'd say about 5 minutes, or yeah, about 5 minutes.
Looks like a lot of people are there, so that's good.
Great. Are you seeing all their little icons?
I am the anonymous cheater, cheetah, and the anteater dolphin.
Perfect. Perfect.
Talking about, voting the anonymous cheater, right?
Yeah.
Sorry.
That's a good one. That's a good one.
Cynthia, somebody's asked if they could forward this to their instructors.
Yes, I'm gonna say more about that when we come back, but
Okay.
absolutely, this is very shareable, and I'll say more about how to do that when we come back. I hope everybody sees slide number 35 with the claim that the dog ate my homework. Because, we try to bring in cute puppies whenever possible. Okay, I'm gonna call you back. Let me know if you can finish up in about 30 seconds or so. I know you haven't had a chance to thoroughly look at everything, but I just wanted to give you a chance to have a glimpse. Liz says, love the clean format with powerful images and great examples. Thanks, Liz. Yeah, somebody in my office, Ebony Van Dross, is really responsible for making this look so good. She did all the image gathering and she made the slides so clear and the text so perfectly. Marie says, I love the format. Okay, great. Thanks, everybody. I would like to pull your attention away from that and back into our PowerPoint here, if that's okay. It's always dangerous to send people on a field trip because then they want to stay on the field trip. If I've got you all back in the room, quote unquote, room, let me ask you if you would like to add something to the chat, a comment about what you saw, that would be great. I see some people putting love it. I love hearing that kind of praise too. And I always pass that on to Ebony because, as I said, she's the one in our office who really figured this out. But while you're chatting your feedback in the chat, I will just answer the question that was posed. So this is a Google slideshow. And it's view only. Some of you might have noticed that it's view only. So you can't actually manipulate the slideshow as it is. But what you can do is you can make a copy of it. If you have Gmail, if you can make a copy of it and then it's yours. You literally own it. It's in your Google Drive. You can do whatever you want with it. On the first page of the slideshow, we had a little note that said, feel free to adapt this in any way you want. You can add activities. You can make slides more crowded or less crowded. You can delete activities if you want. You can just, you get to own this as a teacher. And you can break it up into multiple slideshows, if you'd rather do it that way in your classroom. If you don't have Gmail, you can download it as a PowerPoint or whatever sort of presentation software you use. So just simply download it. Now you have it on your hard drive. And then again, you can adapt it in whatever way you want. And what we ask is that if there's, to not change the text of somebody's article, because that's, their article with their byline. This one actually doesn't. The other Google slideshow has more people's actual stories, but to not change the text, but to adapt the activities and to adapt the slides in any way that is what works best for your class. So Sandra says, thank you for sharing, allowing you to copy it. Can't wait to use it. Great. From H Huron, excellent tool. Thank you, H Huron. I appreciate you. Carrie says, outstanding, great. At the end, I don't know if anybody made it to the end of the slideshow, but there is a little evaluation form that will, the feedback will come to me and Ebony, and we would love your feedback. This is the first time that we have taken our lesson packets, and you'll see on the Change Agent website, we have something like 24 lesson packets up there now. This is the first time we've changed them into Google Slideshows, but we did it for obvious reasons, pandemic, distance learning, we wanted to have something be really teacher and student friendly. And you could, as teachers, consider using a combination of these two approaches. Some people are doing things like mailing hard copies of things to their students because they want their students to have the experience of holding something in their hand, being able to mark on it, underline things, circle things. So they could have it as a text that they hold in their hand, and they could have it as a Google slideshow when you present it in class. So you could experiment with both, But we would love it if you could fill out that evaluation at the end. That'll come to us and we'll just get your feedback, because as we do this more and more, we would love to have your guidance on how to do it well. Do I have an answer sheet for the discussion of the claims? I don't have an answer sheet for that. I would count on students finding the info. Yeah. And, good luck, teachers. Students are going to come back saying all kinds of different things. So this is an opportunity for them to just engage critically with this concept. And it's complicated. It's not always clear what's what, or how would you evaluate different things. Also, you can read one news source that's going to say mail-in voting is absolutely fraudulent, and then you're going to read another news source that says, it's not that fraudulent. Yeah, it does happen a little bit, but not that much, and they put out this vanishingly small percentage of fraudulent votes that happen during mail-in voting. Or then you're going to hear different things from different sources. So you get to evaluate sources. Is this what should I think about when I use this source? Is there something I should be aware of? Should I check other sources? Why don't I check kind of all around to balance out, what I'm learning? It's really just an opportunity for critical thinking and, really not right or wrong. I think that's the way I would look at it. Yes, I think it would be a really engaging, especially if people, how we're all stuck in our little Google tunnels and if it's not Google, then it's some other thing, our neighborhood or our community or people we hang out with. And it just, you get in your little tunnel of what you think is right and wrong. And then you just use more information to confirm the already existing bias that you have. Well, this would be a chance to, maybe people might break out of that, in a number of different ways. It would just be so fun. Like, that would be the goal of this class. The goal would not be that everybody has the same definition of fraud or everybody thinks the same thing about fraud. The goal would be that people have broken out of their bubble a little bit and experimented around with different sources. So Claire says it will be a good learning opportunity for me. Yes, I totally agree. That's the fun thing about being a teacher, is we get to go poke around here and find stuff out. And it's exciting. It's fun to use your mind. It's fun to be a critical thinker. It's fun to evaluate things and evaluate sources and to not be, to not be caught just kind of accepting stuff whole cloth and swallowing it without, filtering through, what it might actually mean. This is a really important civic skill. It's just as important as voting, right? It's being able to think about what you're hearing and evaluate it. Because we don't have a democracy if people aren't able to think about these things. So I thought I would ask you all. Well, if you saw in the quiz, you might have an answer for this, but so just looking back at this idea of gerrymandering, what would you say? Would you call it suppression or fraud? Oh yeah, let me, while you're thinking about that, Linda says that there's a Google quiz. So thank you. Yes, I don't know if you noticed, there was a Quizlet and a Google quiz. So if you have a Quizlet account and you have your students using Quizlet, that quiz that we did about is it suppression or fraud is in a Quizlet. The other thing is that there's also a Google quiz for it. Again, make sure you make that quiz your own. It's a form, it's a Google form. Make sure you copy that form and make it your own, because if you don't, then we're going to get the answers to your students on that. We don't want your students' answers. We know that you want your students' answers. So make a copy of that Google form to be your quiz, and that way you'll get the answers. Okay, is it suppression or fraud? I see some people saying both, some people saying suppression. You know, in the quiz, we have something on gerrymandering actually, and we call it suppression. But when I was just looking at it again just now, I was kind of like, well, it could also be fraud, really. So I would just dive in and let people think. Why would you? And then as a teacher, you want to, if somebody says, well, I think it's more fraud than suppression, then ask them why. You know, and then they're using the vocabulary, they're using the concepts, they're making a case for themselves and for their thinking. And, you know, that's just a great academic and workplace skill. So, and if I had time, I would ask you, Carrie, why do you think both? And I would ask Claire and Tammy, why do you think suppression? But we'll have to save that for another day. So thanks for thinking about that. I want to remind you all that in the last presentation I did in early September, I had you all kind of walk through the voting ambassador packet, and we have the exact same thing for this. This is a very lengthy packet, and we have a very lengthy Google slideshow to go with it. It's a little late to try to train your students to be voting ambassadors because the election's coming up in just a few weeks. But if you have time, if you wanted to roll out this project-based learning opportunity, I highly recommend it. It's really powerful. You can always slice and dice it as you will. Don't have to teach everything in it. You just pick and choose. But the idea of it is that you train your students to go and talk to other people about voting. So even if they can't vote themselves, they can learn the mechanics of voting. They can learn what people need to do. They can support people to vote. And, you know, if one person who can't vote gets 5 people to vote, you know, that's a big contribution to our civic life, right? So check out this voting ambassador packet. It also has its own Google Slides to go with it. The way you can find it is if you go to that change agent lesson packets tab, you'll see a link to both the PDF and the Google Slides. Krista dropped in the link to the lesson packets earlier in the chat, so you can find it there. Okay, so just a few more minutes I'm going to take, and then we're going to move on. I want to remind people when you teach civics that it can seem a little bit like you're up on your soapbox. You know, maybe you sound like you're saying to students, you should fill out the census and you should, and that you're directing them too much, or, you know, you should vote, you have to vote, it's the right thing to do to vote, and you could sound a little soapboxy. Now, everybody has to kind of figure out their own way. I think it's really important to bring your passion into the classroom. At the same time, you don't want to be intimidating to people or sound like you're telling them what to do. It's more like I try to look at it as, you know, you're passionate about people being able to engage in this life and in civics and in controlling what happens in their community and having a say. And so you want to equip them with tools, and in the process, they're going to learn a lot of basic skills. Those basic skills include reading, writing, digital literacy, document literacy, navigating websites, navigating documents, sticking with a hard document, you know, seeing a hard document, not running the other way, right? But actually sticking with it, persisting. You're teaching all those skills. So if somebody says to you at the very beginning, crosses their arms, sits back in their chair and says, I'm not going to vote. I don't believe in voting. I don't even want to be in this class if that's all you're going to talk about. It's important to have in your back pocket, you know, that there's more going on than that there's tons of skills that they're going to be learning. So, you know, the proper answer there is, you know, cool, that's your choice. You know, that's your choice. I'm not telling you what to do. But as a teacher, this is just really ripe with learning opportunities. So that's why I chose these learning materials for you. Okay, so that's, oh, and then not just the skill of reading and writing and stuff, but they're going to gain a lot of knowledge, right? They're going to gain a lot of vocabulary. They're going to gain a lot of knowledge about how government works. If you do some of those current events pieces, you're going to learn a lot about the branches of government, because there's just huge fights going on, right? Like people are just getting sued right and left. I mean, some government official in Texas decides to do something around voting, and then they get sued and it goes to court, and then the court decides if it was unconstitutional or not. So, the branches of government are all fired up right now, and they're all doing stuff. And so diving into this content is going to teach you about how all that stuff works. It's really a really great way to learn it. I want to end by reminding you, and this isn't going to be the end because there's also, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and go back to Krista, and she's going to let you know about a evaluation that you can fill out for this webinar. But before we get to that, I wanted to just say something change agent-y, which is we have a new call for articles available on our website. The deadline is November 2nd, so still right before Election Day. So I'm really loading you all up with lots to do. We decided to make the topic mental health and emotional well-being, coping strategies, managing stress. This is a really big deal for obvious reasons right now. People already were very, very maxed out, already operating at maximum stress, and now we're operating at even more maximum stress because of the pandemic. So we wanted to get learners thinking and talking about how they're managing. And so the call for articles is on our website, and I would really love to get more and more submissions from Texas. I got a lot. Thank you so much. I don't know if anybody here in today's webinar was one of the teachers who helped facilitate their students to submit to the change agent, but I got some really great pieces in the pandemic issue. I hope all of you will look at the pandemic issue and see. One of my favorite ones is called Denko the Dog. It's written by a Texan. And there's some other good pieces in there too. So please keep in mind this call for articles. Students get a $50 gift card if their piece is accepted. And it's a great opportunity for students to write for an authentic audience. Okay, I put the username and password there again at the end. I just wanted you to make sure you all have that. Please share it with your students, share it with any colleagues, save it on your computer, save it on your phone, have your students save it on their phone so that they can use all the resources really easily. Thank you again, TCAL, for getting that for all your teachers. And thank you again for having me back for yet another webinar. It's really great to be with you all. And I will stop sharing. If there's any questions in the chat, I'll try to look at them while Krista takes it from here and shares the evaluation link.
Okay. Yeah, I didn't see any questions. Claire Gilliam shared that in local elections, 20 to 30 votes can make a difference, make or break a candidate, and that is very, very true. Mm-hmm. So, yes, thank you so much. As always, the resources that you share are so incredible. Does anybody have any questions for Cynthia?
I'm looking in the chat. I don't see any questions, just a lot of encouragement, which I really appreciate. And every vote counts. Thank you, teachers, for your hard work to get the word out. Yeah, I want to echo what Tracy Hendricks just said. It's a big deal to try to take this into the classroom. You might run into controversy. You might run into some sort of difficult to decipher bureaucratic stuff. Believe me, I've spent a lot of time on the Texas websites, the government websites, trying to figure this stuff out. Texas does not make it easy to vote. I noticed that you're sort of way at the bottom in terms of voter turnout. I think you're in the bottom 3 of all the states for turnout. And it's partly because it's pretty hard to vote in Texas, that they don't make it easy for you. And so what you're doing is you're taking in a hard thing into the classroom. It could feel discouraging, but I celebrate you for even thinking about it. I celebrate you for being here today and just being able to kind of take in all this information. And I hope it was helpful enough to make you feel like you could take it back.
Well, thank you very much again. And we're about 5 minutes early, but we'll go ahead and close it up and say goodbye until next month.
Great. Thank you so much again. And everybody, good luck with the election season. We'll see you.
Thank you, Cynthia. Sounds like we need it.
Yeah. Thanks so much.